We asked American Cardinal Raymond Burke what Christians should keep in mind when voting. And here's what he told us. We have now an America to rebuild, to recover those fundamental truths. They were expressed in the Declaration of Independence. For years, the clash between Cardinal Raymond Burke and Pope Francis simmered just beneath the surface. Two powerful figures locked in a silent war over the soul of the Catholic Church. But now, with Pope Francis gone, that silence is shattered. Burke has come forward with a revelation so explosive it's left even the most seasoned Vatican insiders stunned. We're not talking about simple disagreements or theological debates. This is something far deeper, something buried. In his first public statement since the Pope's passing, Burke hinted at secrets kept behind closed doors, decisions made in darkness, and a version of church history that the world was never meant to see. Raymond Burke often disagreed with Pope Francis. They had different views on many topics. Burke did not agree with Francis on LGBTQ rights, the role of women in the church, and other changes the Pope supported. Over time, their disagreements became serious. Pope Francis even asked Burke to leave his apartment in the Vatican. After Pope Francis passed away, Burke finally spoke out. What he said surprised many people. No one expected him to say these things. His words shocked many Catholics around the world. Raymond Leo Burke was born on June 30th, 1948, in Richland Center, Wisconsin. He was the youngest of 6 children in an Irish Catholic family. His parents, Thomas and Marie Burke, lived on a dairy farm. Life on the farm was simple. Religion was an important part of their daily life. When Raymond was in 2nd grade, his father was diagnosed with brain cancer. A local priest came to their home often to bring communion to his father. Raymond watched the priest closely. He felt something powerful in the way the priest carried out his duties. This experience inspired him. At a young age, he decided that he wanted to become a priest. In 1962, when Raymond was just 14 years old, he joined Holy Cross Seminary in La Crosse, Wisconsin. This was a big decision for someone so young, but he was serious about it. Later, Burke moved to Washington, D.C., to study at the Catholic University of America. There, he earned a bachelor's and a master's degree in philosophy. After that, he went to Rome to study theology at the Pontifical Gregorian University. He stayed at the Pontifical North American College, where many future bishops and cardinals also lived. Some of his classmates later became high-ranking leaders in the church. In 1975, Burke was ordained as a priest at St. Peter's Basilica by Pope Paul VI. This was a proud moment for him. It marked the start of his career in the church. After his ordination, Burke returned to La Crosse. He worked at the Cathedral of St. Joseph the Workman. He also taught religion at a nearby high school. In 1980, the church sent him back to Rome to study canon law. At first, he did not enjoy the subject. He felt confused and unsure about his future. However, an older priest noticed that Burke was struggling and decided to help him. With this support, Burke started to take on more important roles, like canon law. He worked hard and later earned a doctorate in the subject. Burke became known as one of the best experts in canon law. When he returned to the United States, he was given more important roles in the church. In 1989, Pope John Paul II gave Burke an important job. He made him the first American to serve as defender of the bond at the Apostolic Signature. This role showed that Burke was no longer just a local priest, but he was becoming an important figure in the church's legal system. Burke's influence continued to grow. In 1995, he became bishop of the Diocese of La Crosse. Then in 2004, he was promoted to Archbishop of St. Louis. In both roles, Burke became known for his strict and conservative views. He supported traditional Catholic teachings and often celebrated Mass in Latin. Burke stood out from other church leaders. He firmly defended the church's teachings on marriage, abortion, and the Eucharist. He believed that politicians who supported abortion should not receive communion. Many conservative Catholics supported his position, but others criticized it. In 2008, Pope Benedict XVI brought Burke back to Rome. He named him prefect of the Supreme Tribunal of the Apostolic Signature, the same court Burke had worked in years earlier. Then in 2010, Pope Benedict made him a cardinal. At that point, Burke had become one of the most powerful voices in the church. Everything changed in 2013, when Pope Francis was elected. He had a different vision for the church. Francis wanted the church to be more open and welcoming. He said things like, "Who am I to judge?" when asked about gay people. He also supported the idea that evolution and faith could go together. Burke did not agree with these views. He spoke out against many of the Pope's changes, especially when it came to LGBTQ rights, divorce, and communion rules. He said the church should never change its teachings on abortion or marriage between a man and a woman. A public split with Pope Francis followed. In December 2013, Pope Francis removed Burke from the Congregation of Bishops, the group that helped select new bishops. This showed their growing disagreement. Things got worse in 2014 during a Vatican meeting about family issues. A report suggested that the church should see some value in gay relationships. Burke was upset. He said the church felt like a ship without a rudder. His comment made international news. Soon after, Pope Francis removed Burke from his legal position. Instead, he gave him a symbolic role as patron of the Order of Malta. Francis said it was not a punishment, but many people believed otherwise. Even without a high-ranking Vatican role, Burke did not stay quiet. He continued to speak out against changes in the church. He became a well-known figure among conservative Catholics and was seen as a leader of those who opposed Pope Francis's direction. Still, Burke did not change his beliefs. He remained critical of the Pope and once said that the church might need to formally correct him. That idea shocked many people in the Catholic world. Now that Pope Francis has passed away, people are once again paying attention to Burke. At 76 years old, he is still active and continues to speak out. Some people wonder if he could become the first American pope. He has strong support from conservatives and remains one of the most well-known figures in the Catholic Church. In 2014, Burke faced a major setback after he tried to remove a top official for approving the use of condoms for people in Burma. Pope Francis removed him from most of his duties. He was only left with a ceremonial role. Francis then sent someone else to do Burke's job at the Order of Malta. Reports said Burke was basically suspended. It was never called a punishment, but it was clear that he had lost power. In 2015, Cardinal Burke said the real cause of abuse in the church was radical feminism. He believed it had damaged both the church and society since the 1960s. Then in 2019, he repeated his ideas. Along with German Cardinal Walter Brandmüller, Burke said the main reason for the abuse crisis was what he called the homosexual agenda. He claimed that many priests involved in abuse were confused about their own sexual identity. These comments caused a lot of anger and debate. But for Burke, they reflected his belief that the church was moving too far from its traditional values. In 2016, Burke made a bold move. He publicly questioned Pope Francis along with 3 other conservative cardinals. He sent the Pope a formal letter. It was called a dubia, which means doubts in Latin. They were responding to a document written by Pope Francis called Amoris Laetitia, or the Joy of Love. The Pope had written that the church should show more kindness to people who felt rejected, especially divorced people who had remarried. Under church rules, people who remarried without an annulment could not receive communion. They were seen as living in sin. But Pope Francis said that priests could help each person decide what was right for them in private conversations. Burke and the other cardinals disagreed. They said this caused confusion and made church rules unclear. They asked the Pope to explain his position. Normally a pope would respond with a formal answer, but Pope Francis said nothing. Burke didn't stay quiet. He warned that if the Pope did not reply, then a formal correction might be needed. In 2018, Burke went further. He said that sometimes it is necessary to disobey the Pope. Many Catholics were shocked. A cardinal speaking out this strongly against the Pope was rare, but Burke believed it was his duty. In 2019, another argument happened. This time it was about the meeting of bishops from the Amazon region. Burke and another conservative bishop, Athanasius Schneider, wrote a long statement against it. They said the meeting included ideas that went against true church teaching. They especially did not like the church's openness to local Amazonian customs. Burke thought this gave too much space to beliefs that were not Christian. He also spoke out against letting married men become priests and giving women more roles in church ceremonies. He didn't even agree with girls serving as altar servers. Burke said that boys lose interest when girls are included. He believed the church was becoming too focused on women. He said radical feminism had made men feel unimportant in both society and the church. Burke also strongly opposed same-sex marriage. He said Catholics should never vote for politicians who support it. He claimed that these ideas come from Satan. He called same-sex marriage a dangerous lie that would hurt people, families, and the country. This strict way of thinking became a major part of who Burke was. As Pope Francis tried to modernize the church, Burke worked just as hard to stop those changes. When the COVID-19 pandemic began, Burke became a major critic of vaccines. He especially disliked vaccines that were developed using stem cells. He said people should not trust them. But he didn't stop there. Burke also repeated false information and conspiracy theories. He said vaccines might be used to control people. He even claimed they could contain microchips and be part of a plan by the government to track people. He linked these ideas to something called the Great Reset, a theory about global control. Even though many experts said Burke's claims were not true, he continued to believe them. Strangely, he later got very sick from COVID-19. He had to be put on a ventilator for a week and was close to dying. Still, he survived and returned to speaking in public. Burke also strongly spoke out against abortion. While both he and Pope Francis are against it, Burke felt the Pope was not doing enough. He asked American bishops to stop giving communion to Catholic politicians who support abortion rights, like John Kerry and President Joe Biden. He said letting them take communion weakens the faith of others. Burke also defended the old Latin Mass, called the Tridentine Massachusetts. This version has been used since the 1500s. It is said in Latin and follows strict rules. But in 2021, Pope Francis made it harder for churches to use this older style. He said it had become a symbol for people who refused to accept change in the church. Burke disagreed. He said the new rules were harsh and extreme. He even questioned whether the Pope had the authority to make these changes. In 2017, Pope Francis said clearly, "I do not see Cardinal Burke as an enemy." Still, their disagreements were very public. Pope Francis removed Burke's privileges. In late 2023, Pope Francis made a serious decision about Cardinal Burke. He removed two major benefits Burke had enjoyed for years: his free apartment in Rome and his monthly Vatican salary of €5,000. These were not small things. Burke had lived rent-free in a large apartment and received regular pay even though he often criticized the Pope. Why did this happen now? It came right after Burke's latest public complaints. In October 2023, Burke had again spoken out. This time he was upset about two things the Pope had recently supported: allowing priests to bless same-sex couples and letting divorced Catholics take communion. Burke did not agree with either and said so in public. This time, Pope Francis replied with a letter. He said that priests could bless same-sex couples, but only in a way that made it clear their relationships were not the same as traditional marriage between a man and a woman. This was a big change in the church. It showed the Pope was trying to be more welcoming, but still keep some rules. Burke thought this was too much. Soon after, Pope Francis held a meeting with Vatican leaders on November 20th. They decided Burke had crossed a line. They said he was using the church's support to fight against the church's leadership. Because of this, they took away his apartment and his salary. Even after this, Burke said he would not leave Rome. He told reporters he would pay for housing himself if needed. He also said, "I've never felt that the Pope sees me as an enemy." Still, the situation showed that the line between simple disagreement and disloyalty had been crossed. Then rumors made things worse. After the Pope's decision became public, a traditional Catholic news group published a story. It claimed that during the November 20th meeting, Pope Francis had said, "Cardinal Burke is my enemy, so I am taking away his apartment and salary." This quote made people very angry. It made the Pope seem personal and unfair. It also matched what some traditionalist groups already believed, that Pope Francis is too hard on people who disagree with him. But there was a problem. Pope Francis told writer Austin Ivory that the quote in the news story about Cardinal Burke was completely false. Francis explained that during the November 20th meeting, he simply informed Vatican officials that Burke would lose his apartment and salary. He did not give personal opinions or make any attacks. The quote that was shared in the news had been made up. It was likely leaked by someone who wanted to make the Pope look bad. Sadly, by the time the truth came out, the false quote had already spread widely on the internet. He did not give personal opinions. Several people who were in the room during the Vatican meeting confirmed that the Pope never used the word enemy. One official told the Associated Press that Burke was losing his privileges because he was causing disunity in the church. Another told Reuters that Burke was working against the leadership of the church. None of these people said that the Pope made it personal. They all agreed that his decision was based on concern for the unity of the church. This showed again that Pope Francis was not acting out of anger, but out of what he thought was necessary to protect the church. Burke does not apologize. Even though Cardinal Burke was punished, he did not apologize. In an interview with the New York Times, Burke admitted that the Pope no longer wanted him to hold any leadership roles. He said, "It's clear that the Pope doesn't want me in any leadership position." However, he denied being anyone's enemy. Burke said he had spoken out because he believed it was his duty. He thought some of the Pope's decisions were harmful to the church, that his wife felt he had no choice but to speak. "I had to speak up because it was my duty," he said. For many years, Burke saw himself as someone who was protecting Catholic tradition. He strongly disagreed with the changes Pope Francis made. He thought that change should never come at the cost of basic church beliefs. That belief influenced everything Burke said and did. While he claimed to be following his conscience, his public comments often caused division. For many church members, that division became too serious to ignore. Burke also tried to clear his name from people involved in politics. One of them was Steve Bannon, a former advisor to U.S. President Donald Trump. Burke had once been on the board of Bannon's group, the Dignitas Humani Institute, but in 2019, he resigned. The reason Bannon wanted to make a movie based on a controversial book called In the Closet of the Vatican, which Burke did not support. Burke said he had only met Bannon 3 or 4 times, and only to talk about church matters. He wanted people to know that he was not connected to any political campaigns. For many years, people inside and outside the Catholic Church wondered when Pope Francis would finally take action. Burke had spoken out many times against the Pope's leadership. He had written letters, criticized church events, and even hinted at formally challenging the Pope's authority. Still, Pope Francis let him remain a cardinal. He didn't remove his home or take away his salary until now. According to Ivory Pope, Francis is a patient man. He gives people many chances, but in the end, there is a limit. After watching Burke's actions for more than 10 years, the Pope finally decided that Burke had crossed the line. Cardinal Burke had often spoken in public, written articles, and given interviews that went against the Pope's message. Some people said he was creating a kind of second leadership in the church, an alternative voice that challenged Pope Francis. At the same time, Burke was living in a Vatican-owned apartment, and his expenses were being covered by church funds. To many people, this seemed unfair. They saw a wealthy cardinal using church support while publicly going against the Pope, the person he had promised to follow and respect. One person who follows church news said it was wrong for Burke to do this. Even so, Burke became more popular with conservative Catholics. Many of them saw him as the only true voice defending traditional church teachings. But despite all this, Pope Francis did not punish him out of anger. Instead, he made his decision quietly and without a public statement. The public only found out about it later, most likely because someone leaked the news to the media. That leak may have been done to make the Pope look bad, but the Pope made it clear that his decision was not about revenge. He said it was about keeping peace and unity in the church. Now that Cardinal Burke has been officially removed from his privileges, the situation seems to have reached its highest point. And after the recent death of Pope Francis on Easter Monday at the age of 88, attention has moved to what will happen next in the church. When a pope dies, the Catholic Church enters a time of mourning. But behind the scenes, an important process begins. It's called a conclave. During the conclave, cardinals from around the world come to Rome to choose the next pope. Only cardinals who are younger than 80 years old are allowed to vote or be chosen. Right now, there are 138 cardinals who can take part in the vote. They will stay inside the Vatican for about 2 or 3 weeks. During that time, they will meet privately in the Sistine Chapel. There, they will vote over and over again until one person gets at least 2/3 of the votes and agrees to become the next pope. This is the same process that brought Pope Francis into leadership in 2013 after Pope Benedict XVI resigned because of health problems. That resignation was the first time in 600 years that a pope had stepped down. Now, after the death of Pope Francis, the Church must choose a new leader again. On the more conservative side there is Cardinal Peter Erdo from Hungary. He agrees with many of Burke's views, but is not as outspoken. Right now Burke is ranked 6th among the top candidates. What makes him different is the political support he is getting. If Cardinal Burke is chosen as the next pope, the Church could shift back toward a stricter and more traditional path. But if someone like Cardinal Tijel or Cardinal Praline takes the lead, the Church may continue the more open and modern direction that Pope Francis started. Either way, the decision will shape the future of the Catholic Church for years to come, and the world is watching. Please like and subscribe for more updates.